Hi, everybody. Professor Pastor Paul here, coming to you from my office at Agnes Scott College. I hope everybody's doing okay. It's been a while. I've enjoyed my time off, was able to catch up with some things that were kind of pressing down on me, got those taken care of, had a little time to breathe, a little time to get some rest. So I'm happy to be back here at Holy Week. The text today is for Wednesday of Holy Week, which is, of course, today. And it has to do with Jesus, the disciples, and in particular, one disciple, Judas. The gospel reading is from John, chapter 13, verses 21 to 32. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, "Very truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "Do quickly what you were going to do." Now, no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. I don't know about you, but I have a number of short, memorable quotes from movies and books. You know, you see movies, maybe you see them twice, maybe 3 times. You read a book a couple of times, or maybe there's just a memorable quote. And I've got some of these stuck in my head, and I use them all the time with family and friends. For example, whenever I get out of the car, say I'm at the grocery store, and I'm going into the store for something very quickly, and I leave someone waiting in the car. Maybe it's Elizabeth, maybe it's Kristen. I go into the store, but before I do, I look at them and I say, "I'll be back directly. Mind you stay strapped in." I'll be back directly. Mind you stay strapped in. That's from the 1987 movie Raising Arizona, which I have seen approximately 30 times. Or whenever someone comes up and tailgates me on the interstate, gets too close behind me, I say very dramatically, "You shall not pass." You shall not pass. This comes from the Lord of the Rings. And whenever someone has to run a quick errand, in the middle of a gathering, somebody's got to leave for a minute, I always say to them, "What you must do, do quickly." What you must do, do quickly. Just as Jesus said to Judas. But happily, that's where the similarity stops. Just with somebody leaving to go do an errand. What you must do, do quickly. It is Passover week, and Jesus is sharing his final meal in the upper room with the 12. He has already washed their feet and commanded them to do likewise with one another. And after this, we read that he is troubled in spirit. Jesus is troubled in spirit. Now, since Jesus feels this way, troubled in spirit, we can be sure that we should feel no shame when we ourselves are troubled in spirit. To be troubled in spirit is to experience this human life. To be troubled in spirit is to open one's heart to the promises and the risks of friendship, intimacy, and love. And you cannot have the benefits of these things without the risks. Now, Jesus has indeed opened his heart and his life to his friends, the 12, and he is keenly aware of the risk. It's staring him right in the face, in fact. He knows trouble is coming, and he does not run from it or otherwise avoid it. Jesus does not run from the trouble staring at him. In fact, he speaks it. He names it. He says it out loud. He says, "One of you will betray me." Now, Jesus knew who would betray him, and we know also, but the disciples did not. Some years ago, I took some students from another college on a tour of European cities. And on the way out of Europe, on the way back home, we flew out of Milan. And we had a day to kill in Milan, a day to spend. And one of the things I'd planned for us to do was to stop long enough to view Da Vinci's Last Supper, that very famous, world-famous fresco, painted on the wall of the refectory in an ancient convent. Now, in that fresco, The Last Supper, it is not hard to find Judas, the betrayer. He's small, he's fearful, he's reaching for bread, and he's the only one in the whole thing who is leaning away from Jesus. Everyone else is leaning towards him, he's leaning away from him. But in that room 2,000 years ago, no such clues were visible. There sat the disciples, the same 12 as always, looking and acting for all the world like their regular selves. "One of you will betray me." Who was it? They didn't know. Actually, they weren't sitting there. They were reclining on couches. Passover meals were taken reclining because such a position represented freedom. Free people reclined when taking meals. Slaves stood or sat. And anyway, our passage tells us they were reclining. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. The one whom Jesus loved. Now that line, "the one who Jesus loved," prompts a few questions. Who is this disciple Jesus loved, and didn't he love all the other ones too? Well, I think it's safe to say that he loves all his disciples. He's just washed their feet, even the feet of the betrayer. So he loves them, but there's clearly one for whom Jesus feels a special affection. Who is it? Anglican bishop and New Testament scholar N.T. Wright suggests that this person may have been John himself, the writer of the gospel, and perhaps the youngest of the 12. If it was indeed John, the son of Zebedee, he may have been a cousin from Jesus' mother's side. He may not yet have been 20, and Jesus clearly had a soft spot for him. And perhaps since this disciple was perhaps so very young, just a lad, that's what N.T. Wright calls him, since he was just a lad, and perhaps related to Jesus, the others might not have resented Jesus' special affection for him. It would have been sort of like a father-son kind of deal. An uncle-nephew kind of deal. Simon Peter recognizes this special disciple, this disciple that Jesus loved. Simon Peter sees this beloved disciple sitting beside Jesus, knows that he's close to Jesus, and sort of motions to the beloved disciple to ask Jesus who the betrayer is. Who is it? Ask him. So the beloved disciple leans over and whispers to Jesus, "Lord, who is it?" Before Jesus answers, let us pause for a moment to appreciate this scene. The 12 are gathered with Jesus, who alone, but also perhaps a betrayer, of course, is aware that the climax of the story is at hand. Jesus knows the end is coming. In the upper room, John sets Jesus between two characters. Who are they? The beloved disciple and Judas. They nicely represent the good versus evil, light versus dark theme that saturates the Gospel of John. John is all about the dark and the light. That is one of the overriding images in the entire Gospel, darkness and light. On one hand, we have the disciple Jesus loved, young, absolutely trusting, devoted, full of light. On the other hand, we have Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, the one whose heart was set on betrayal long before the drama of today's passage began, the one who has succumbed to darkness. Judas sits there, perhaps unknowing, perhaps, sort of like feigning incomprehension, as Jesus quietly answers the beloved disciple. Jesus answers him and says, "It is the one who will betray me is the one to whom I give this bread when I have dipped it in the dish." The one who will betray me is the one to whom I give this bread when I have dipped it in the dish. So, in yet another move full of symbolism, Jesus dips the bread into the dish and hands it over to Judas. Now, at the time and place, this act, this giving of bread dipped into a dish, was recognized as a sign of friendship and goodwill. So this passing of the bread from Jesus to Judas, a sign of friendship and goodwill. Therefore, in making this move, Jesus is showing a lot about what's going on. He not only tells the beloved disciple who will betray him and just sort of relays that information, but also indicates the depth of the betrayal. Here's a betrayal not only of Jesus' mission and a giving over of Jesus to death, but a personal rejection, a selling out of a specific and intimate friendship. By handing over the bread, Jesus is not only telling the beloved disciple who will betray him, but he is indicating the depth of that betrayal. But notice he's also showing something else. It is a sign of friendship. It is a sign of goodwill. So Jesus' love for Judas persists. So the third thing that this passing of the bread shows is Jesus' persistent love for Judas. This love for Judas, this betrayer, this snake in the grass that is Judas, exists not only despite Judas's one great betrayal, but despite Judas's long record of dishonesty and selfishness. We read in the previous chapter that Jesus had visited Bethany just before this, and there Mary had taken a pound of expensive perfume and anointed Jesus' feet with it. Very expensive perfume, a whole pound of it. Judas protested, saying, "Why did we not sell this perfume and give the proceeds to the poor?" Sounding all virtuous and moral. But he had not said this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and had made a habit of stealing what was in it. In other words, that perfume represented a whole lot of money that Judas could not any longer embezzle. So Jesus' act of friendship, the offering of bread, was performed with a full knowledge of Judas's long habit of selfishness and greed. So the passing of this bread indicated to the beloved disciple, number one, this is who will betray me. Number two, the betrayal is a particular and intimate betrayal of a friendship. And number three, Jesus' sign that he still loved Judas. So Judas takes the bread, and we are told Satan entered into him. Now, this is not a description of demon possession in the sense of the Gerasene demoniac or other unfortunate characters we often come across over in the Synoptic Gospels. Satan here is a legal term for an accuser. The Satan, really, or Hasatan in Hebrew. A kind of sort of prosecuting attorney. That's who the Satan was, who brings charges against others. So Satan is the accuser. So the accuser entered into Judas. So the entrance of Satan, the accuser, into Judas's heart indicates a kind of final hardening, a resolve to accuse, to point the finger, to follow through with his plan. Judas, in John's symbolic world, is being used by the forces of darkness, which, ever since the very first few words of the gospel, are aligned against the light. The light came into the world, but the darkness did not overcome it. So Jesus looks at Judas and utters the line I have used so often in jest. It makes my wife laugh every time I say it. I love it. What you must do, do quickly. What you must do, do quickly. Apparently, Jesus is not enjoying this very much and wants it to move along. Go ahead and let's get it over with. Let's do it. One can hardly blame him. The world is about to do its work on him. Jesus knows how the world often responds to the love of God with distrust, with anger, and with violence. The world responds to the love of God with anger, violence, and distrust. This is coming to him, to Jesus, and he knows it, and he wants it to be over with and done. As for the others who did not hear the conversation between Jesus and the beloved disciple, they are as confused as ever. They don't know what Jesus is talking about. They don't know what it is Judas is going to do. And they don't know where he's going when he leaves them. They figure some arrangements have been made between Jesus and Judas having to do with Judas's role as treasurer, whatever. They don't know. So, after receiving the piece of bread, Judas immediately went out, and it was night. Again, with the light and the dark. To love is to risk. Jesus loved and was loved in return, but was also betrayed in return. It is not clear that you can truly love and receive only love in return. So it is in our text where we find one of the Bible's greatest, nearly invisible scenes of love and friendship. Jesus and the beloved disciple leaning toward one another in the midst of the meal. Jesus and the beloved disciple speaking intimately and simply about profound things. And we also find that singular move of rejection, betrayal, and abandonment. Judas leaving his friends in the light of the upper room, entering the darkness of night, which is darkness on every level, to do the work of the world on Jesus. Amen. I hope to see you at our Good Friday service this coming up Friday at 7:30 in the sanctuary. Hope to see you there. Good to be back. Y'all take care.